So let's start the process now. I'll start with one very, ancient Sanskrit mantra, which reads like this: Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Long time, more than 2000 years back, Aristotle said that knowing one's own self is the beginning of the wisdom. But in Indian tradition, Adhyatma has been one of the most ancient mode of writing. This is, if we go back in our history and in our civilizational values, we will find that Adhyatma is the first topic which was taught by all the rishis and all the saints in ancient time. So knowing oneself is one of the most important aspects of life. So before we start that process, I'd like to mention two things. The first is that we are all divine. Each one of us is divine. And this is also clear because all of us want to move ahead. For example, if you take a person with a small shop, he wants to become a big businessman. Look at an MLA, he wants to become a chief minister. A chief minister wants to become a prime minister. A person who has limited knowledge of Shastras, he wants to become, have profound knowledge. So each one of us want to move forward in life. You will not find anybody in your practical life that he wants to go down. And this natural tendency is indication that we are all divine and we want to move forward. The second point is that the human being is the most fascinating and most miraculous machine ever made in this universe. There's nothing which can compare with this machine. You take its engineering, its software, everything is fantastic. So we should know these 2 points before we move forward. Now, for example, we buy a laptop or we buy a cell phone or we buy a washing machine. What do we do first? We read the user's manual. We try to understand the features and the operating principles. And that's what enables us to operate that machine properly. So I think we should do the same with our own machine, which is the most sophisticated in every respect in this universe. So let's start that process right away. Now, if I say, what is this? You will say, this is my, I will say, this is my hand. And what is this? This is my face. If somebody asks me about my body, then I'll say, this is my body. So we are using a possessive pronoun that this is my body, this is my face, this is my hand. So my body is not me. This is very clear. In any language in the world, we always use possessive pronoun. The same pronoun which we use even for a purse, that this is my purse, this is my laptop. So body is not me. This should be clear. This is the first beginning of the process. And that is why we should go into various layers of the human constitution. I prefer to call it human constitution because it has layers after layers, and we will try to understand those layers today. So let's start with the first layer, that is the body itself. The body is the largest part of the human being, and it is the most miraculous functioning it has. If we look at some of the principles of the body, we eat vegetables, we eat dal, and we drink water, and we drink juice. It goes into our body and it becomes what? It becomes blood, and it becomes bones, and it becomes neuron, it becomes flesh. All this inside the body without any contribution from us. There's a system inside the body which is so sophisticated that it converts everything into body parts. And not only that, whatever we eat inanimate things, and they become live inside. As soon as they go inside you, they become live and your body parts. Imagine the system inside, how it works. And then we see from this live body, we get these hair which are inanimate. You can cut them, nothing happens. So the animate gives rise to inanimate, and inanimate becomes animate inside the body. This is what you call miracle of the body. No scientific laboratory can do this despite all the inventions, all the discoveries we have made in the last, say, hundreds of years. If you look at the body a little bit more, the science tells you that there are 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels inside the body. And every single day, the blood flows about 100,000, 1 lakh kilometer blood chalta hai body mein, 100,000 kilometers every single day. This is what the flow of the blood is. If you look at the liver, the scientist will tell you that an area of 5 square kilometer will require at least 20 factories to produce the chemicals which are produced by liver. That is what you can see the difference in the small little body part and large factories we put up. Even those factories are not even enough to produce what liver does. Similarly, if you look at various organs of the body, they are absolutely fantastic. Look at the breathing system. We keep breathing oxygen and taking out carbon dioxide. We don't even know how it happens. But the body is so intelligently doing it day and night. Even when we are asleep, it keeps happening. And when you are tired, you feel asleep. You don't know what the sleep is, how it comes. Science has not been able to define what sleep is. They simply say that your system becomes, inoperative in most cases in terms of sleep, at the time of sleep. So if we look at the systems of the body, I'm just giving you a few examples. If you talk to a scientist, he will tell you the miracles of the body. So the body is the largest part of the human constitution. It is the grossest, it is miraculous, but at the same time, it is the weakest part of the human constitution. The weakest, I am underlining that. Despite being such a miraculous part, it is the weakest. The second layer of the human constitution is called senses. We have 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action. For example, a person in the old age is not able to see properly. He is not able to hear properly. His sense of smell is not operating properly. What happens? And a person whose body is fine, but he becomes like a vegetable, because the sense organs enable your body to perform all the tasks which you need to do in this world. And without those operating properly, you become like vegetable. So the sense organs are higher than the body in terms of our operating system. You understand me, I suppose? Because as soon as the sense organs are malfunctioning, this whole miraculous body becomes like vegetable. So this is the second layer of our body, which is sense organs, and the sense organs are the means for us to understand this world. We understand this world, we grasp this world through our sense organs, through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, through our hands, that is the touch. So all these organs enable us to understand this world. But sense organs are not as powerful as we think they are. There is a third layer beyond the sense organs, which is, we call it man or mind, which is far more powerful than the sense organs. We even call it 11th or 6th sense, because this is far more powerful. Now, if you analyze yourself, you are listening to me right now. But if your mind is not with me, you are not really listening to me. It happens many times that we have read a book, we have read 10 pages, and we don't even know a single word we read. because our mind was going somewhere else. Maybe it was in the school, maybe it was in the house, maybe it was in the kitchen, in the shopping center. So when the mind is somewhere else and you are doing a function, you do not actually do that function. The sense organs work with the unity of mind and the senses. Each of the sense organs work that way. Without the unity of the two, the senses do not work properly. And mind is a very volatile instrument. It is an instrument which is firstly travels fastest in the world. There is nothing which travels faster than mind. So mind can reach in a second to the moon and sun and New York and Washington and coming back to Delhi and Jaipur, and in a fraction of a second it can travel anywhere. In all the Indian literature, it is said the mind is the fastest traveling instrument in this universe. Nothing can travel faster than mind. Secondly, mind is a very volatile instrument. It keeps taking you here and there without your knowledge. You don't even know what is happening, and you just disappear somewhere else. You try to, when we do the meditation, at the end we will realize that we try to regulate the mind, but it leaves you in such a way that you don't even know where it went and how it went. It's like waves in the ocean all the time, going ups and downs and creating a kind of a strong wind inside your body that you don't know what is happening. So mind is very, very, what you call a strong instrument, but at the same time, very volatile and very unstable instrument. So this is the third layer: body, senses, mind. Now, how do we control this mind? There is one instrument within our body system which can enable us to control the mind, and which does to some extent. That is called intellect. Intelligence or intellect enables us to debate. This is good, this is bad. For example, your mind wants to eat chocolate, or you want to have a sweet from the sweet shop. But then your intellect will intervene and say, no, you have diabetes, please don't eat this. Now you want to park a car somewhere else, then your mind will say, no, this is not the right place to park the car, so please don't do that. So the mind and intellect, they intervene, they interact with each other constantly, continuously. For example, you are going to a party, then your intellect will come, okay, this is the party, we need to take a gift, this is the kind of clothing we have to wear. So the intellect comes into the play and immediately guides the mind what to do. So the intellect keeps guiding the mind, but it does not succeed all the time. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it does not succeed. So this is the nature of these four organs: the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect. Intellect basically discriminates, it analyzes what is available, all the information, it synthesizes and takes a decision. But very often intellect is in two minds. We have dilemmas. And in Sanskrit it is called Kim Kartavya Vimud. The person becomes Kim Kartavya Vimud because he doesn't know this is good or that is good. And those dilemmas we face in our life many, many times. And these are the limitations of intellect. Intellect can be used to actually defend anything. You see the policy of the government. There are people who have very fine arguments in favor of the policy. There are people who have very fine arguments against the policy. And both seem to be right, because that is the task of intellect. Intellect can give you the arguments to justify or to unjustify things. That is the task of intellect. It doesn't say it is right or wrong, but it gives you the arguments. So these are the four operating layers which we understand properly: the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect. There is a fifth layer. This is very subtle and very, very important, and I would say most important. That is called ego. Ego is something which is the most it is not easy to feel it, but it is there all the time. For example, you are a boss, you go to your office and the receptionist doesn't say you good morning, how are you? And you walk in, you feel, oh, what is this? Your ego is immediately hurt. You go to somebody's house, there's nobody to receive you, your ego is hurt, and oh, nobody has come to receive me, what is this? So these are things, in fact, the ego is a very, very major thing. If you look at the causes of the First and the Second World War, they were all because of the ego hurt. You can see now, if the ego of a big leader in the world is hurt, it can lead to war. So ego is a very subtle instrument and very deep, but very refined. You don't feel it. It is there all the time in our personality. So these are the 5 physical layers of human constitution. 5 physical layers. I am telling them physical because even mind is physical, even ego is physical, intellect is physical. What is the definition of physical and non-physical? Physical is that which is affected by the vagaries of time. Anything which improves with time or deteriorates with time is physical. For example, the mind grows with time. A child has a different mind, a young man has a different mind, and an old man has a different mind. So mind grows, so it is physical. Actually, the material which is used, which has been used to create mind, and the wind is the same. Wind is also physical, the wind and mind have the same material. So these are physical layers of human constitution, which we should know this is our operating system. Now we started that I was telling you that this is my hand, this is my body. So I call this my body, this is my intellect, this is my mind. Mind is not me, my mind, my intellect, my eyes, always possessive pronouns. So we have to find out who is the owner, who owns them. Because if you say this is my house, you find out who is the owner of the house. Similarly, this is also a owner. That is also a house. In fact, in Indian writing, they call it Puri. Nav dwaron ki Puri hai ye. That is what they say. So, is Puri means the city ka. This city, it is called city actually in Indian writings. Who is the owner? Now we should find that out. And that is what we should understand, because without that ownership, we cannot really understand ourselves. Now look at 2-3 things. When a person dies, something leaves that body which renders all his senses, his intellect, his body completely useless and decomposed. We observe it every time. We see a dead man, something leaves the body which renders everything absolutely into what you call inanimate state, in a state of decomposition. That is one thing, there's something which leaves the body. Secondly, a very profound argument which we should understand. For example, when we make a car, we put together many things. We put together the chassis, we put together the engine has various components. Those are put together, tires, whatever. There are thousands of components which are put together in a car to make a car. Somebody does it. But when we grow from a fetus to a young man, who puts together our hand? Anybody does that? Anybody puts our eyes? Anybody puts our nose? They come from inside automatically. They grow, not only for us, but for all living beings. As soon as the fetus, starts growing, everything comes from inside automatically. Now, why does it happen? Because there is a force inside you which enables the body to develop in that fashion. If, for example, a dog develops in different fashion, because that force enables dog to develop in a different fashion. A tree develops in a different fashion, because The force inside the tree enables it to develop in that fashion. Similarly, we develop in a different fashion. Though we are all human beings, still we are all individually different. Everybody has his own thinking. Everybody has a world of his own. Actually, each one of us is a world of our own. So anything which can develop from inside into a full, wonderful machine like ours, there has to be a force inside. Otherwise, it cannot happen. Now, we were talking about the food. You take all kinds of things and it get digested. There has to be something inside the body which makes it digested. So the fundamental argument is that human body has something inside it which is not visible, which cannot be seen with eyes, which cannot be understood with mind, but there is something which enables it to grow, something which leaves at the time of death, which leaves the body completely inanimate, dead, decomposed. So that is the ownership of the body. That is what we call, that is why we say this is my body, because the ownership is that we call it Chaitanya, we can call it consciousness, we can call it Atma, we can call it Paramatma, some people call it Akash, whatever. Whatever the name you give doesn't matter. The fact is that there is a power inside us which regulates and which keeps us alive, which regulates this whole system. So that is the sixth element of the human constitution, which is the actually real element. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that that is the part which remains constant, which never dies, which cannot be dried, which cannot be burnt, which cannot be made wet. So that is the part which leaves the body and the body is dead. Now what happens to that? When it leaves the body, what happens? I think we should know a little bit about that. At the time when we die, this consciousness leaves our body. There is 5 types of prana, in which one of them is called Udan Pran, which normally stays in the upper part, mouth and other part of the body. Now that pran leaves along with the human consciousness, and very significantly, the balance of our mind, subtle part of our senses, and the karma. The balance of karma, the mind, the subtle part of senses, leave with consciousness, with the Udan Pran, and that leaves our body. In a very subtle form, it goes into the space, outer space, and takes another body. Whatever happens, we can talk about that in a separate session. But that is what happens at the end of life. Now, to get into slightly, deeper into this business of Atma, because a lot of people, science always say that there is no Atma. Even Buddhists do not believe in Atma. Science say that everything is made of matter. That is what they have come to. And they are making investigations, but they are not able to understand how the consciousness is created. Even Charles Darwin said that, I don't know how it was created, but somehow one cell was created, then it multiplied. Until today, the scientists don't know how that one cell was created. So there's no answer to that. They have tried various other systems. They go to the atom, they divided the atom into subparticles, proton, neutron, and electron. Now they have been further divided into quarks and electron. And now they are talking about waves. They are talking about what you call quantum fields. So the science doesn't know precisely how the consciousness comes. They only talk about the matter. They have been able to break the matter, and they say that this is how it happens. But if you think little bit in your own self, give me a simple example anywhere in the world that can be created without consciousness. We are humans. We have consciousness. That is why our mind can think, our mind can create. We can create what? We can create a house, we can create a city, we can create an aircraft, we can create a railway train, we can create a submarine, we can create anything because we have consciousness. But as soon as that consciousness leaves, can we create anything? That body cannot create anything. So the consciousness can create matter, but matter cannot create consciousness. Give me one single example. For example, this is what you call matter. If I keep it for 10 million years, can it create anything? It cannot create anything because it has no consciousness. Now, we have consciousness, we can create. Animals have consciousness. They can create in a limited way because their mind is not so well developed as that of a human being. So they can create certain things, but not in the way as we do. So consciousness is the prerequisite for anything to be created. And that is what Vedic science says, that in the beginning there was nothing but pure consciousness, and which created the 5 great elements of this universe. And then gradually the life was created. The science, on the other hand, is only exploring the matter. So we need to move forward from matter. If we really want to understand ourselves, the body is the matter. Body is not us. This will come and go. As Krishna says, this is like a clothing. When the clothing become, they get torn, we change them, we throw them away. Similarly, the soul, the consciousness, throws away this body. When this body becomes useless, it becomes torn and it is not able to operate properly. And the consciousness leaves our body and takes new birth in some other body. And the operating system, as I mentioned, is working through our body, our senses, our mind, and our intellect. Now, how do we remain engaged in this world? That is a very significant part. Why we are not able to think of these things? Because of 5 things. We'll talk maybe some other day if we get a chance. We'll talk why do we have 5 fingers in our hand. But there are 5 reasons why we remain engaged in the world. Kam, Krodh, Mad, Lobh, Moh. Kam means the desires. It's not necessarily the sexual desire, but all desires. All types of desires. Okay, I have to go to Bombay tomorrow. Day after, I have to go to Delhi. I have to go to shopping center. I should buy this. I should get this school for my children. These desires keep propelling us all the time in life. So we remain engaged. That is one, including the sexual desire, which is very, very prominent because a large part of our gamut of desires is driven by sex. Whether it is clothing, whether it is food, whether it is travel, whether it is beauty and all that, whatever it is. So these desires drive. That is the first element. Growth. When the desires are not fulfilled, we become angry. If somebody is, you want to earn some money and somebody is becomes a hurdle in the process, then you become angry against him. So that anger comes out. So anger is the direct result if a desire is not fulfilled or some hurdle comes on the way. So Kam, Krodh. Mad is Ahankar, that is ego. I talked about the ego. It is very subtle. It hurts, and it hurts so badly that you cannot, even husband and wife, the ego is hurt. The relationship of 30 years can be destroyed within a few minutes. That's what happens to that. Lobh. Lobh is the greed that we want more and more. If we have X amount of money, we want to have X plus 1 and then X plus 2 and X plus 10. If we have X amount of power, we want to have X plus 1, 2. This continues to go ahead. Even for knowledge, we want to have more and more and more. So that is the greed. And moha is attachment, that this is my wife, this is my son, this is my husband, this is my house, all this attachment is. So these are the 5 elements that keep us engaged. There's nothing wrong with those 5 elements. We live in this world, we have to have those. Those are part of the human life. But the last element is important, that we should not get entangled into that process. We should remain detached. We do everything in the life, but we should remain detached. Like Krishna did everything in Mahabharata, but he was detached. The same way we do everything for our family, for our friends, we conduct ourselves in this world, but without getting too much attached. Things happen because you can do things, you cannot control the results. So in that sense, we have to take, so we remain engaged through our sense organs, through our mind, through our intellect, through our body into this world, without ever realizing that there's something behind that body. There's something which is running all this process. Like when you see a building outside, it looks beautiful. You see 100-story building, well done, but nobody ever thinks about the foundation of that building. Without that foundation, the building cannot stand. So we have to think that way. We look at a tree, we look at the fruits, we always look at the leaves and everything. But do we ever think about the roots? We don't. The same thing happens with us, with our own body. So we have to think that there is some root of our own sustenance which keeps us alive and which makes this system run. So that is where I thought I will close the basic discussion of today, and I will request you for questions if you have any. And after the question answer, we will have 5 or 7 minutes of meditation as we decided earlier. Now, just to recapture the whole thing, I would like to say that we have 5 physical layers of the body constitution, that is body, senses, mind, intellect,